Hi, I'm Dawn Jenyce. So today I had the honor of interviewing a new friend of mine. Her name is Lisa Deck. She is a thought leader. I met her when we did a summit together in July. And as I watched her do her talk, I was just resonating with everything that she said. And I was behind the scenes going, yes, 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 because it's so powerful and so cutting edge to where we are today about intuitive eating. She truly is a thought leader. Stay tuned and continue watching as I interview Lisa Deck.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Well, I'm really excited to hear what you have to share with us today. Uh, your story is fantastic and your background is stellar. So I love that where you came from, the industry that you came from, and how you're working with people now. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I would love to. I started off as a social worker. I have a master's in social work and a master's in child development. And I started my work on the west side of Chicago, actually working with children in a high need area. That's kind of a kind of a difficult area of Chicago, and I loved it. I loved my work as a social worker. But once I started my own family, it just was too much to do both. And so I decided to kind of step away from that for a while my kids were little. I have three little boys. They're ages 7, 9, and 11. So they keep me very busy. And we moved to North Carolina. So I've been here in North Carolina now for about 8 years. And just recently, I've started to have the itch to go back and do something in line with that helping profession that has been a part of my heart for so long. And we're going to probably get into a little bit more of like what brought me to where I am. But my history is that I was a chronic dieter with no understanding that the relationship that I had with food in my body was disordered. I thought that was what everybody did. So for a really long time, that was my story until in about 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years ago, I discovered intuitive eating, and I had never heard of it before. I didn't know what it was, but I listened to a podcast that introduced me to the concept, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And as I learned more about it and played around with this thought experiment of like, what if I never had to diet again? Like, what if I could release that part of my life that always felt like it was going to be a struggle forever? It was just such a liberating feeling. And so I learned more about intuitive eating. I became kind of evangelical about it and telling all of my family and friends about it. And I ended up getting certified as an intuitive eating counselor from the dietitians who originally created the framework and wrote the book on intuitive eating. So that's where we're at today.
So exciting. I love the idea of freedom from the concept of dieting because I grew up with it. Once I got to a certain age, 18 years old, and in the 80s, that was the culture for women. When I was in college, there were so many anorexic girls, and bulimia was like in style, believe it or not. It was like the whole dorm was doing it, and it's just so damaging to our bodies, but mostly to our psyche.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
messes with our head. And
Absolutely.
I love this concept. So, uh, how do we shift from being a chronic dieter,
Yeah.
always focused on that, to what you are today, an anti-diet crusader?
Yes. So for me, it was kind of like I said, just this kind of slow unraveling of as I started to educate myself, as I started to listen to this kind of new framework of relationship with food and body, it started to kind of like take the blinders off, if you will. I think we're so conditioned from childhood really to think that like part of our job to be a good woman particularly is to keep our bodies within a certain size and to constantly be monitoring and managing that. And I think I just accepted that as part of like what it means to be a woman. And once I started really questioning that, once I started learning more about the harm that that was doing, like you said, not just to my body, but to my mind, to my relationship with my intuition, that like it started to take the blinders off. And I think it's one of those things, which I think is true in so many areas of our life. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like I started to see it everywhere. And I was like, oh, who's invested in me continuing to feel bad about my body? And why are they? Oh, well, it keeps me a reliable consumer, right?
Mhm.
It keeps me small. It keeps me questioning my worth. There was all these things I started to see that were kind of not in line with my values outside of this world, outside of the dieting world. I felt like women should be empowered to be who they are and be as big and powerful and impactful as they can be. I mean, that was truly my worldview. But then I started to see the dissonance, right? I believe that over here, but in here, I feel like I'm still trying to keep myself in a box. And I started to just not be able to make those two things align. So I think that that's the case for a lot of people as they start to unravel these threads. It starts small. It starts with little kind of holes, poking holes in the framework, and then all of a sudden you see it everywhere.
Oh, yes. And like you said, you can't unknow what you know. And then it does. All of a sudden you start recognizing it. And so let's talk more about the whole concept of how it really affects women specifically and our image and who we think we're supposed to be. That's a big deal.
Yep,
It's a big deal
absolutely.
of identity, you know? And I why do we always sort of go back to that sort of image that we're supposed to have and that identity? It's a cyclical thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that there are two things that really keep women in diet culture. Even though, I think we hear things like most diets fail, or, diets can be harmful. And like, we almost like filter that out because we don't want to believe that that's true for us, that's for somebody else. But I think that two things that are really strong that keep us in it. One, like I already mentioned, is like the societal expectations. It's like the water we swim in. And there's so many things, whether it's just visually, all we're seeing represented. I mean, and we're getting better and better, I would say. But when you and I were young, I mean, there was nobody on TV that was in a bigger body. Everybody you saw in TV, in magazine ads were thin and beautiful and clear skinned and often blonde hair, blue eyes, like you, John, like just beautiful. And we felt like that was the expectation. It didn't have to be told to us explicitly. Now, for some people, it was told to them explicitly that they weren't enough, that they were too much, that they needed to diet or whatever. My experience was that it was more subconscious. It was just all around me. So I think those expectations that are put on women, and I also think that the social connection. So we bond as women a lot around food and body and how we're maintaining ourselves and what diet we're doing next and doing things together to stay accountable. There's so much, well, women just crave community no matter what. And I think there are so many industries that have kind of capitalized on that by creating community around things that are actually harmful for us. So I would give an example of like Weight Watchers, right? Not only is that a diet, but they've created community around it. I've actually never done, that's one of the ones I haven't done, but like you go to meetings, right? You do things as a group. There's, I assume now, like message boards and ways to like feel like these are your people, right? And I think the same is true for a lot of like specialty gyms and stuff. Which like, I'm not saying anything negative about exercise. I think exercise is great, but I think sometimes it gets combined with like, you also do this eating plan or you buy their protein shakes or whatever. And you get kind of caught up in this diet culture because of the community. That's what keeps you there, because you feel like you belong. You feel like these are your people. This is why I am actually working towards starting a community of my own. It's going to be called, it's in the like pre-launch phase right now, and it's going to be called Embody Collective. And I just felt like when I pulled out of diet culture and was like, I'm not going to do this anymore, I felt like it's kind of isolating. You kind of like, once you opt out, especially the people around who don't really understand or aren't quite there yet on their own journeys, it's kind of isolating. And so I found myself at home, like following people on Instagram and, reading everything I could get my hands on and listening to podcasts, which is great, but I was sitting alone in my house doing it. And so I really needed other people who were kind of going through this almost deconstruction process as I was. And there's really nothing for that. So I thought, what if I create it? What if I create like the anti-Weight Watchers, where we get the education of why dieting doesn't work and it is actually harmful, and we can do it together. We can do it in community. We can support one another. We can lift one another up. We can find our people.
Love it.
So that is going to be the goal of Embody Collective when it launches later this year.
I just think that's amazing. And the idea of deconstructing that world, and it's just a piece at a time so that it doesn't happen all at once. It's just like anything, it's a practice. And to do it in community, I think is super important, like you said, because that's a fear to be kicked out of a tribe. That's like a primal fear that we have because we wouldn't survive back in primal days. You know what I mean? It's still in us. And especially as women, because, we thrive in community. There's strength in numbers, all of the above. That's really exciting, Lisa. Make sure that you invite me because I want to be part of that.
I will. I will.
Because I hear you. It is very isolating. It is. And I'm finding myself kind of struggling with that too, because even though I'm out here on social media and out, it's still, I find myself at home, alone at home too. And that is not healthy either. So if we can, do the greater community online, like you're talking about here, I'm assuming the groups and that type of thing, and then locally connect with people as well. I think they're both very important.
I agree completely. And I think that there's just so much when you can be face to face with people, when you can connect on that level, when you don't have a Zoom screen, or, I mean, it's wonderful to be able to connect in this way. I think though, post-COVID, I think a lot of people are craving like human interaction, face-to-face interaction. And so that would definitely be part of it. Just like the group that you and I are part of, that we get together a couple times a year and get to see each other and hug each other and have that connection as well.
Yeah, it's really important for the human experience. It's, we're not meant to be virtual. We're meant to be together in person and feel that energy in person. So I agree with you.
Totally.
So back to the really health and weight. There is, there's a line that we sort of walk on that. Could we talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. I would love to talk about that. I have learned so much in the last couple of years as I've been kind of peeling back the layers on this, because for the longest time, I really believed that smaller equaled healthier and bigger equaled less healthy. And I thought that was true for me. And quite frankly, I thought that was true for other people too. If they wanted to get healthier, they needed to lose weight. If I gained weight, then I was less healthy. And those two things were just like fact in my mind until I started learning the truth that is not the case, that there are people in bigger bodies who are in optimal health, and that there are people in smaller bodies who are not in great health, and that weight is not the measure of health. It is not the cause of health problems. Now, it can be correlated, and there's a number of nuanced reasons why a higher body weight is sometimes correlated with some worse outcomes, but it's not the cause. And I think, like, unless you're like scientifically minded, sometimes cause and correlation get intermixed. But I think it's important for us to know that higher weight does not cause worse health outcomes. It can be correlated. Somebody said once, and I can't take credit for it, but it just stuck in my brain as like a great little mantra, is that weight is not a behavior. What impacts health outcomes is healthy behaviors.
Mhm.
Weight in and of itself is neutral. It's not a behavior. So just asking somebody to lose weight to improve their health is not necessarily going to improve their health. What will improve their health is if they start adding in healthy behaviors. So I always say, like, I am definitely not anti-health. Like I want to live a long and healthy life, but what I'm about is adding in healthy behaviors, not taking out any one category of food, or not giving myself enough nourishment. All those things could change my weight, but it wouldn't necessarily positively impact my health. So I feel really, really strongly about learning myself and then teaching others what are the healthy behaviors, and really having a more global, holistic view of health instead of just calories in, calories out. But like, what else impacts health? As you know, our stress impacts our health, our sleep impacts our health, our social relationships, like you say, their communities, and how fulfilled we are in our intimate relationships. That all affects our health as well. And I think we need to have that much, much broader view, rather than just like, eat X amount of calories and you'll be healthy. Yeah.
Agreed, agreed. And, that is such an outdated philosophy of calorie counting. Like, seriously, way outdated. And unfortunately, the medical industry still, like, that's what they look at for nutrition is calories. And
Yeah.
there's so much for our industries, like the medical industry, to learn about that, because you're right. It's behavioral. And every single one of us is unique. Our
Yeah.
bodies are unique. Our experiences are
Totally.
unique. There's never been another me, and there never will be. It's
Yes.
so how we choose to feed our body is unique as well.
Absolutely. And
And
what our bodies need, right? Like, our bodies don't even need the same things at the same times. I feel like my first, and it was many, many more years before I really got into intuitive eating. But for people who might be new to this, I feel like my first kind of brush with intuitive eating was when I was pregnant. I feel like that's a time where you're really encouraged to listen to your body and what does the baby need? I'm craving cheeseburgers. Like, the baby must need more red meat and iron. So I'm going to let myself eat cheeseburger because that's what my body is telling me, or the baby is telling me that I need. And it was such a period of time in my life, 3 different times, that I felt freedom around food. I felt like I'm doing this for my baby. I'm doing what my baby needs. And so if anybody watching has had that experience, you might have had just a glimpse of intuitive eating when you listened to what you were craving. And as long as it was appropriate, like, you followed that craving. If it was, everyone has their story of like, this is what I craved while I was pregnant. And it was probably some nutrient that your body needed more of at that time, and we're like encouraged, like, it's a one time we're like encouraged to listen to that. Was that your experience at all?
yes, and I didn't put that together until you just mentioned that. I'm sure there's a lot of you out there that haven't either, but that is brilliant. It's true. So isn't it interesting that, and of course, we want to be healthy for our baby that we're carrying. Of course, we
Right.
do as mothers, but why not for us too? Why not
Right.
intuitively give yourself who you have to love, which I'm all about self-love as
Yes.
well at all times. Yeah, here's okay. So with my first child, it was mashed potatoes and gravy. So there was something in those potatoes. I just had to have mashed potatoes and gravy at all times.
Yes.
I was probably a bit underweight too when I got pregnant.
Mhm.
For my body. My body probably needed that extra
Yeah.
fat and, whatever potatoes, I guess potassium and the other vitamins that are in a root vegetable. And then with my second child, so I don't know, we'll have to think about this one. Again, I must have been underweight. It was waffles with berry syrup and heavy cream. So I
Yeah.
definitely did fat.
Yeah.
Our body needs fat. Our brain
Love
needs
it.
fat.
Well,
Yeah.
how nice that you let yourself have that, and I think, yeah, I think, what I love to do is then like follow down the rabbit hole of like, why are women valued and allowed to follow their cravings when they're pregnant, but then when they're not, it's like, as soon as that baby's out, it's like, don't listen to your body, get back in shape, like, start restricting. Like, it just makes me think about like, what are we being valued for? And again, I don't think this is something that I was conscious of at the time, but once it started unfolding for me, I was like, oh, I really think women should like learn how to listen and trust their bodies all the time, not just during pregnancy.
Yes. I think we're in a shift too. I think, your your mindset, your thought leadership on this is very timely, because shifting out of the patriarchal sort of
Mhm.
punishing of women in every way you can. Um,
Yes.
and that sounds extreme, but if we really look at it and are honest with ourselves, that is part of this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right. So being an intuitive eater, I just love the term intuitive eating. So how do I utilize my intuition with what I should eat?
Yeah. So for some people, it's really hard because, like I said, we have been taught through dieting for many of us to kind of turn off that intuition, right? Like you might feel like I want to have this, but my diet says, that I can't have it. So it's like it's learning. Dieting, I think, is a process of learning to mute that intuition and look outside for guidance rather than inside. And so making that shift is it's a process. And I think one of the first things that somebody could do is start to play around with that idea of like how can I start to like learn what my body's telling me? How can I like tune into that? And that could be anything. It doesn't just have to be around food, but and then honoring it. So a big part of intuitive eating, I don't know if you have seen or heard of the book, but it started as a book. It's 25 years ago that it was written, and there's 10 principles. And I love it because it's not just about food. There is like a whole bunch about making peace with food, honoring your hunger, but there's also a lot about like respecting your body and learning how to cope with emotions gently and moving your body for the joy of it. And it's very holistic. But for me, it took two things. It took both the education piece of like really learning the evidence, like this is for real. This isn't just some other diet. This isn't just like another way of, being brainwashed. This is real. This is based on science and evidence. And then the experimentation, my own lived experience. So how can I learn how to just check in with my body and decide like what it's telling me in that moment and then honor it. And it can start as little as like after lunch today, do I feel tired? Like I need like to sit on the couch for 10 minutes and just like rest? Or do I feel like it would feel good to go for a walk? And just really tuning in and then honoring that. And I think there's just these little opportunities throughout the day to like stop, check in, and then whatever you feel like your body is like moving towards, to continue along that line. Because what it is about, I think, is really about rebuilding trust with your body. For a long time, your body has not been trusted. And so it's given you signals and you've shut it down. And so it's about kind of rebuilding that trust with our bodies. And then it just like ripples out into so many different areas of our lives, where not just are we retrusting our bodies, but we're retrusting our intuition. Something we get a decision about a new job. We learn how to look within and decide whether or not something's right for us. It's not just all outsourced anymore. We start to reclaim our own trustworthiness, really.
Oh, wow. This is so powerful. I can see this, starting off with the eating and then just exploding and growing and blooming into really honoring yourself with a capital S,
Yes.
your
Yeah.
intuition, which is part of your higher self. Let's just be real. That's what it is.
Yes.
So learning to trust. And that's a big deal, to trust yourself, because you're
Mm.
right. It feels like we've been taught to not trust ourselves, to not trust what our body needs. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I can't have that. Why? Well, because I'm on a diet and I'm not supposed to have that. It's not good for me. Well, maybe it is.
Yeah.
Maybe your
Right.
brain needs it.
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, they've done so many studies that like restriction, which like ultimately leads to binging, right? Whether it's that day or eventually once you've restricted enough, that cycle and then the kind of the weight cycling that goes along with that is worse for your health than maintaining just a regular larger body weight. If that's where you normally fall and that's kind of your body's like biological set point, it is healthier for you to just honor that and stay at that weight than it is to go up and down and up and down and up and down. So really, restriction in general, I think, is not healthy physically, and it's definitely not healthy mentally.
One of the things I started doing, which is the first time in my life in 6 decades, that I've realized that it's a good thing to do, which is when I go up in size, to get rid of the old clothes that are too small for me. Because that is just like punishment to sit there and look at those clothes and realize I can't put them on. And then I feel like I just beat myself up every time I realize that's not going to fit me. Like it's a shaming thing that I'm doing to myself.
It is. And I feel like it's another one of those things where I think it's like we hear it and we know it intellectually, but we still can't break the emotional tie to it. Is like, we know that sizes are totally arbitrary, right? You could be a 8 in one brand and a 12 in another brand and a 4 in another brand. Like and we know it intellectually, but if we have to buy a size that's not the size that we think is the right size or a good size for us, it really messes with our head despite the intellectual. So I do think it's both like that practice, that daily practice of like getting your mind right. And then like the intellectual knowledge of like, this is nonsense and we know it. And we have to like remind ourselves of that too.
Oh yes, it's and I found that the higher price the item, the higher quality, the lower the size is, so that we feel better about ourselves to spend that kind of money on a size 4 instead of a size 8, which we probably really truly are.
Yes. And it's all meant to keep us good consumers, right? It's all meant to keep us feeling not good about our bodies, feeling, unworthy or fearful, and then spending money. And we haven't even gone into all the beauty stuff, but really, I mean, it's all the same, right? It's all meant to keep us buying and in a state of panic that we're not enough as we are.
Yes. Wow. I've got a lot to learn, but as I realize now is that this is a journey. This is a one step at a time process. It is a practice to start treating ourselves better so that we can trust ourselves, so that we start trusting ourselves and our intuition. I just love what you stand for, Lisa. It's so amazing.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much. And yeah, I just want to underline that this doesn't have to be like a switch that gets flipped. Yeah. For me, it almost was, because I was just like mind blown. But I think for a lot more people, it's a slow burn of like, okay, maybe I will just start allowing myself to have snacks when I feel hungry. I'm just going to honor my hunger, and then maybe it's the next step and the next step. Like this can be a gradual, like unfolding instead of just a flip of a switch, because it is not easy. It is decades of learned behavior that needs to be kind of reckoned with.
Yeah, deconstructed, as you said earlier. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I'm wondering about is there any downside or any misconception or things that are wrong about what the term intuitive eating means?
I think there's a lot of misconception out there that intuitive eating just is anti-health, that you can eat French fries and donuts all day, every day, and you don't care about health, and you reject any, attempt to be healthy. And I just think that couldn't be further from the truth. I would argue that intuitive eating is the most healthy when, like we said, we're looking at it from like a wider lens. So recognizing that weight cycling and that restriction binging cycle is really, really harmful for our health. That the psychological damage that can be done by dieting is so unhealthy. The stress of trying to keep your body at a size that's not meant for you is overwhelmingly unhealthy and damaging to our bodies. So I think intuitive eating can be very healthy. One of the principles, it's the last principle, because you kind of have to make your way through all this, this deconstruction and reconstruction, as it were, is gentle nutrition. And it's learning how to honor your body with nutrient dense foods alongside foods you enjoy, recognizing that we're not machines. Like food is not just fuel. Food is also connection. It's love, it's comfort, it's joy, it's celebration, and also nutrition. There are, foods that we need to help our bodies function optimally, to feel our best. And there's absolutely no rejection of those things, just as there's no restriction of anything else. So I really love, like I said, thinking about how to really hone in on healthy behaviors and make those a daily part of my life. And I just think intuitive eating in general is a lot more nuanced than maybe like kind of the 30-second overview that you might get looking on Instagram. You know what I mean? It's not just like a girl sitting with a big plate of burger and fries, which is also intuitive. And it's stopping when you're full. I think that's the other thing, is like developing a trust with your body that I think one of the things that leads to like feeling like you're addicted to a certain kind of food is feeling like you're never going to have it again.
Yeah.
So intuitive eating reminds you that you can have what you want when you want and as much of it as you want, so that when you sit down with a big plate of fries or a big bowl of ice cream, if you get full halfway through, you can feel free to stop, because you are allowed to have it again tomorrow if you choose. And I think that just allows us to kind of get into a place of self-regulation that a dieting, and kind of binging cycle just does not allow for.
Yes. So the fear of being deprived is
Yes.
the real thing.
Yep.
I mean, just, some truth about me is that, when I was a child, food was hard to come by in our house.
Yeah.
And I had, there was 5 of us, and I was the oldest, and there was boys, and they ate everything in sight. And so I became a food hoarder for a while. I mean, it's a psychological, it messes with your mind. And so I can see how that has influenced me over the years, and breaking that and realizing that, you know what, I can eat whenever I want. I can eat whatever I want. And I don't have to, the old rule of cleaning your plate. I don't have to do that. I learned that about 20 years ago. For the first time, I finally realized I don't have to clean my plate. I don't have to. It's my choice. I can stop when my body says that's enough.
Yes. And that is such a huge thing of like rebuilding that trust
Mhm.
of like, I can eat as much as I want. I mean, I tried to say that with my little boys, because sometimes they'll be like, I don't really like this, or I've had enough, just listen to your body. If your body says you're done, that's fine with me. It's just like, it's something that bears saying to ourselves as well. Listen to your body. If your body says you're done, it's okay. And you can have more tomorrow if you want. If this is a food you really love,
Oh,
there's always enough.
talk about peace. Like, there's no more fights with your kids about eating something they don't want to eat. Because that's like a big deal when you're a parent. It's like that fight with food.
Oh my gosh. And there's so much pressure, right? To get the right foods in them, but not too much of the wrong foods, and managing that for them instead of like teaching them how to manage it for themselves. And I am not perfect at this. This is still like, I have a picky eater. I have a kid who can't get enough, like they are their own people and they have their own, journeys with it. But it has been definitely helpful for me as a mother too, to be like, same things I'm trying to teach myself. I want to be the culture of our house. There's not going to be any off limits foods. There's not going to be, you have to clean your plate, and there's always good intentions behind those things. Don't get me wrong. But, just teaching them to trust their intuition as well.
Thank you for saying you're not perfect at it, because that's a relief for some of us that aren't perfect at it too. It's,
Yeah.
Thank God you're not perfect at it, because it's way too intimidating to talk to you about it then.
Right, right.
So how can I start being an intuitive eater? Where do I start?
So I would start with some of those like kind of self practices in terms of like, where can you start to just try to tune in to some of what your body's telling you. And for some people, that's going to be like, I don't hear anything, and that's not unusual if you have been, restricting and again, outsourcing that decision making for so long. You might even need to start with like intentionally, making a decision that feels good to you, even if you don't feel those like internal signals from your body. But what I think is going to feel good is going for a walk. What is a food that you, I don't want to push anyone to the point of like getting totally freaked out, but is there a food that you haven't like allowed yourself to have in your house that you could just maybe keep in the house and allow yourself to have, once a day or when the mood strikes you, to just like start to break down some of those fear foods. It's not always easy. And I do recommend like working with a dietitian or at least like reading the book and kind of learning as you go. There is the intuitive eating book. It's very big. It's very heavy on scientific studies, but there's also a workbook, a companion workbook that has a lot of good exercises, things that you can do to kind of like start the process of teaching yourself. I actually did a course before I got certified as a intuitive eating counselor. I actually just as a participant did a course with a dietitian who took us through the workbook. And that was so helpful for me to really learn things that I could do to help kind of build this new skill is essentially what it is. There's great podcasts out there to listen to. There's a bunch of other books in the same genre too that I really like. Are one's called Anti-Diet. Again, has a lot of it's a little bit less dense than the intuitive eating book, but still has a lot of great like scientific evidence behind the things that she's talking about. And then a brand new one called the Body Liberation Project, which I really love as well. So those are some good resources to start with.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I'm big on books. I love books. The workbook companions are great as well that I have. I don't know if you can see all the books behind me here, but
Yes. I
um,
love it.
they're mostly self-help books because that's my jam.
Mm.
But sometimes they get lost on the shelf, and
Yeah.
then they're called shelf help books at that point.
Yes.
Not my
I have
turn
a
to
whole
sell
shelf of those as well.
it. So I found that community helps me a lot to stay on track and to learn to trust myself and my own intuition. And obviously, I love working with coaches. That's how we met in the same program, that type of thing, because it makes me accountable. It gives me support and basically a system. Is
Yeah.
that how you work as well? Do you work with people one-on-one or in groups?
Definitely. So we will be doing mostly group work when Embody gets off the ground. And I think it's like learning from somebody who's just a few steps further down the road. Like I do have my credentials, but I am not perfect, like I said. And but I've been doing this just a little bit longer. So if somebody is brand new to this, I've been doing this a little bit longer. I love talking about it. I can talk about it all day long. And so I'm hoping that what our community is going to give is that kind of mutual support of people who are on the journey together, as well as that kind of educational and resources to back up and make you feel like you are on the right track.
Wonderful. And if somebody is very interested now, even
Yeah.
before the group gets started,
Yeah.
should they reach out to you? How do we start this?
Yes, definitely. So right now, my website is under construction. It will be embodycollective.com.
Okay.
If you go there, you'll just see a little thing that says under construction, check back soon. But you can always reach out to me. Probably the best way is Lisa Deck. That's my first and last name together at live.com.
Okay, I'm writing it
And I
down.
can put you, yes, and I can put you on the waiting list for the notice when the membership gets launched. And hopefully I will also be doing some like one-off workshops as well. So if people want to dip in their toe, they'll have a chance to kind of see what it's all about.
So great. I'm really excited for this group. I definitely want to be invited. So you've got my
Yes,
contact information already. Put me on the list.
definitely.
It fits right in with the work that I do with clients, and my people need you. They need to learn about this. So thank you so much, Lisa, for meeting with me today, talking about this important concept, this thought leadership that you have. It's beautiful. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much for having me. It's been such a joy.
Same. All right. We'll talk to you soon. And everybody, make sure that you send Lisa an email at lisadeck@live.com, lisadeck@live.com, and say, put me on your list. All right. Talk to you later.
Thank you so much. Take care.